I'm Susana Mayer. I have a doctorate in human sexuality, and I'm the creator and founder and host of the Erotic Literary Salon in Philadelphia. How I got to Philadelphia? I've only been in Philadelphia for 10 years, but about 13 years ago, my mother decided I needed another mother, and she introduced me to Frances. She just knew that Frances and I would connect, and it took me a while to decide that I really wanted another person in my life. At the time, my mother really didn't know it was going to be another mother. Frances and I met. My mother became wallpaper, and Frances and I talked for about an hour and a half, and we just connected. And I must have given her my email address. I don't remember doing that. And Frances at that point was in her early 80s. And my mother was just a couple years younger than that. Several years later, my mother dies, and Frances emails me. At this point, she's 85, and says, I missed your mom, because they used to winter together in the same place, and I had to tell her my mother died suddenly. And that was the same year Frances's husband of 64 years died. And at the time, I had gone back to school to finish my bachelor's degree. And so I'm in the middle of finishing my degree. I need to do all these interviews of older women for my thesis, but Frances wants me to visit her in Philadelphia, and I'm on my way back to Guatemala. And I'm like, I don't really have I'm thinking to myself, I don't really have the time to do this, but she could die. She's 85 years old. I mean, she could die tomorrow, and I really want to see her, and we've been emailing back and forth. And I tell her my project, and she said, come to Philadelphia. I have a bunch of old ladies that live in my apartment building. And I said, fish and people stink after 3 days. How long can I stay? And she says, 5 days. She just pulled it out of the hat, clearly. So I come, she introduces me to all these women. We sit around and talk sex. They've never done that before. We have a great time. And I decide I really want to stay in the States to finish my degree. So I figure I'll go to New York City because I know New York City, and I'll find a place to house it, and that'll be great. And she said, why are you going to New York City? And I said, well, because I know New York. I don't really know Philly. I've been here 3 days. And she said, my apartment's empty. I go to Florida in the winter. You can stay here for the winter. And we worked it out, and she says, but I insist that you stay an extra few weeks, that we cross our paths when you arrive and when you depart. And she looked at me very earnestly, she said, and because we're friends, aren't we? And I said, well, of course we're friends. And she said, well, then we're going to do that. Now, Frances, a little background, at this point she's 85. She retired, I think, 20 years prior to that. She was a family therapist. She headed a clinic of family and marriage counseling, so her background is psychology. And so when we talked to each other, we did a lot of therapy back and forth, just in the way we discussed life. And so I stay with her for 3 years. Just in the winter, we sort of bookmark each other as friends on either end. And in the summer, I would go back to Guatemala. And then when Katrina arrived, which was 7 years ago, at the same time Hurricane Stan hit Central America. People don't know about that because in the news in America, North America, it was all about Katrina. But Stan devastated Central America. I mean, there were towns that they literally just decided they became cemeteries overnight. And I used that as a marker in my life. I decided not to go back and live there. I decided my life was going to be in the States. But what was I going to do? I only had a place to stay in the wintertime, so I thought, I'll look for a place in the summertime for Philly. And I'm looking, and she knows I'm looking around. And about 2 weeks before I'm to move in, she said, why are you moving somewhere else? And I said, well, because we have this agreement. Summertime, I go somewhere. And she said, you can stay here. So for the past 7 years, she goes in the summer to Florida, but in the winter to Florida, and in the summers we are together. We have become a mother and daughter team. She said to me one day, may I call you a chosen daughter? And I said, absolutely, if I can call you a chosen mother. Most of the time we leave out the word chosen. We are mother and daughter. According to everybody, we sound the same, because when we pick up the phone, people go, "Oh, this is Frances," and I go, "No, this is Susana," and it happens the same with her. We look alike, which I guess people do, even dogs and their owners look alike at some point. She's 30 years older than I am. We're best friends, and we're roommates. And never in a million years would either of us thought that would ever happen. And we give permission to a lot of people to create extended families, to get another mother or father. Even if yours is living already, you can't have enough mothers and fathers. So that is my extended family. It grows. I don't know if I have time to even talk about more of my family. I have a partner. Well, he's not really my partner in the sense that we do not live together. He has a wife who has her issues and how they deal with their relationship. And I've become a member of his family on some level, and he's become a member of my family on some level. And it's a really wonderful relationship, and my mother has adopted him. Now, she calls him a grandson. He's 2 years younger than I am, so it doesn't really quite jive together, but we're a very large extended family, and it works beautifully. And that's the end of my story. Because she started writing erotica when I started my salon 4 years ago. Gives you an idea of what this woman is like, you know. And one of the stories in that anthology is how she was I had to take her to the hospital one morning because her heart was palpitating. And I remembered that I had loaned her my vibrator the night before. And I said, "Frances, tell me about this vibrator. Like, did this happen just after you used the vibrator?" And she said, "I don't know, I fell asleep." She said, "But the same thing happened when I was with Abe about 5 years ago." And I said, "Think you had an orgasm and your heart just went into..." But I had to take her to the hospital because who knew? And it wasn't stopping. So we get there, and there's this, he was an internist, but he was young. He wasn't even 30 years old yet. And we had to and she's telling him everything but the real story. I said, "Frances, you got to tell him what you did to create this." And she said, "Well, I think this could have a relationship." He is turning bright red at this point. And, and keeps her overnight because he feels better doing that. But clearly, as he left the room, he said, "I have a great story to tell my wife tonight."